Korea, and you're watching Arirang News coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-ho, and it's good to have you with us. There seemed to be almost no tangible progress when US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Pyongyang last weekend. In fact, North Korean state media called the meeting regretful and accused the US of being gangster-like. Yet, President Trump has said he's still confident that Kim Jong-un will keep his word. Will that confidence come back to bite him? For now, he's thrown the blame on China, suggesting they're the ones behind North Korea's hard-nosed stance in retaliation for US trade tariffs. We'll discuss all that and more with a guest in the studio later. But first, we start by catching up on the latest headlines with Devin Whiting, who is at the Arirang News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. It's the South Korean president's third day in India and the climax of his visit there. He's got a hectic schedule today that includes summit talks with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and many more events. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun is traveling with President Moon in New Delhi, and he's on the line with the latest. Ho-jun?
Devin, as we speak right now, President Moon is holding a bilateral summit with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, we're just hearing that they are still on their small-scale summit right now, and later on they will have their expanded summit, which includes several of President Moon's cabinet members and aides. Now, this isn't the first time the two leaders have met. They had a couple of encounters yesterday that promoted their close friendship. For example, President Moon and the Prime Minister visited the Gandhi Smriti Museum yesterday and then rode the subway together to attend the opening ceremony of Samsung Electronics cell phone plant in the Noida region. So that will be 11 different events by the end of President Moon's 4-day stay in India. Now, after today's summit meeting is over, they're going to sign several MOUs and hold a joint press conference together. We'll have to wait and see what exactly the two leaders are going to say, but we can assume they will talk about cultivating a future-oriented relationship and promoting economic cooperation. Later in the day, a luncheon will be hosted by the Indian Prime Minister in honor of the visiting South Korean president. President Moon will also participate in a South Korea-India CEO roundtable conference to further encourage minister leaders to expand bilateral economic cooperation and investment. President Moon is also scheduled to hold separate talks with the Indian head of state, President Ram Nath Kovind, and attend the state dinner to be hosted by the Indian president as well. President Moon will leave India on Wednesday for Singapore, the second and last leg of his two-nation trip that will end on Friday. Back to you.
All right, Hwang Ho-jun reporting there from New Delhi. Thank you for that. Meanwhile, South Korea has decided to cancel an annual military drill called the Ulji exercise, which was scheduled for next month in line with the changing circumstances on the Korean peninsula. The Ulji drill is normally held alongside a joint exercise with the U.S. called Freedom Guardian, which the Allies have already called off, so Ulji's cancellation was widely expected. But another annual war game, the Taeguk exercise, will take place in the fall. Our Park Ji-won has more.
South Korea has decided to suspend this year's annual Ulji exercise. The decision to suspend the military exercise was announced at a joint press conference by South Korea's Ministry of the Interior and Safety and the Ministry of National Defense on Tuesday morning, following the cabinet meeting earlier in the day. The Ulji exercise has been held in conjunction with the U.S.-led Freedom Guardian exercise as a joint military exercise since the exercises were integrated in the 1970s. The South Korean government's decision follows recent changes in the security situation on the Korean peninsula, as well as Seoul and Washington's joint decision last month to suspend this year's Freedom Guardian exercise. However, the Taeguk exercise, a Defense Ministry-led annual command post exercise, will take place in late October, along with the Huguk Defense Drill, which is South Korea's annual field training exercise. This year's Taeguk exercise was originally planned for late June, but South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff delayed the annual command post exercise for the first time since it was first held in 1995. Defense Minister Song Young-moo stressed that the South Korean military will continue to conduct independent drills and training as planned, and any decisions on joint military exercises with the U.S. will be made after close consultation between Seoul and Washington. The government also announced that it will further develop a new model of annual military exercises, encompassing a broader range of training exercises based on the concept of comprehensive security to better cope with a variety of threats like terrorism and large-scale disasters. The government also said it will maintain its utmost readiness for any national emergency. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has ordered an independent investigation into allegations that the previous administration was considering a military crackdown on the peaceful protests against former President Park Geun-hye. Those candlelight vigils eventually led to the removal of President Park, who's now on trial for corruption and abuse of power. Here's the announcement from the Blue House this morning.
President Moon has ordered Defense Minister Song Young-moo to form an independent probe team to swiftly and fairly investigate allegations. The Defense Security Command drew up a document that proposed the possibility of declaring martial law.
A civic group claimed last week that it had a document from the military intelligence unit outlining ways that martial law could be used to impose order in case President Park was not impeached and stayed in office. The investigation team will consist of military prosecutors, but no one with an army background or any links to the Defense Security Command. The Blue House spokesperson said the president decided to launch the probe after urgent consultations with his cabinet Monday evening in New Delhi. Defense Minister Song has said the ministry will also abide by the special order and cooperate in the formation of the probe team. Employees in South Korea have now done a full week under the new rules limiting time on the job to 52 hours. The goal of the policy is to improve the work-life balance of millions of people, which for many it seems to be doing. But it's been tough for some businesses to get by without the extra resources. Our Won Jung-hwan went out to hear what ordinary Koreans think about the new system.
Businesses in South Korea with more than 300 employees are now prevented from making or allowing their employees to work more than 52 hours a week. The Moon Jae-in government changed the law as part of its efforts to ensure a healthier work-life balance for South Koreans, who work some of the longest hours in the OECD. The system may have only been in place for a week or so, but those affected by the new regulations say the atmosphere in their offices has become much more positive as a result.
As my company is encouraging us to work fewer hours, I feel less pressure coming to work late or going home early. It also makes it easier to take care of my kids as a working mother.
Since I can't be in the office more than 52 hours a week, my working style has changed. It has helped me balance my time at work much better than before.
Although this is only the early stage of a massive transition for the country, it seems more businesses are adopting to the new system without too much of a hitch. This is mainly because many large corporations were already applying the rules beforehand in preparation for the new system. Some office workers say the changes have made them more productive at work.
At 5:30 p.m. every weekday, an alarm rings and we shut down our computers. At first, I felt under pressure to get all my work done in the allotted time. But over the past few months, I've adapted and I work more efficiently now.
Since our PCs are shut off automatically when the workday is over, employees seem to spend less time smoking, drinking coffee, or chit-chatting with their colleagues.
But it's not all rosy. There's still anxiety and confusion in certain industries. For example, with most workers clocking out around the same time each evening, bus companies are under strain, trying to lay on more buses and find more drivers. Some industries also complain that the development of new products, for example, requires intense periods of long hours, and they say the new restrictions on working hours are going to undermine their business revenue. However, the changes have generally been rolled out smoothly at South Korea's biggest companies. The new system is proving more complicated for mid-sized firms that did not have the resources to implement the system in stages or on a trial basis first. Most experts say the biggest problems will pop up in the coming years when small firms that generally don't have the funds to hire extra people will be subject to the same strict rules. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
It's been almost a month since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signed an agreement with US President Donald Trump promising the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But despite little progress so far, Trump says he still has faith in the man with whom he shook hands. Kim Yo-sun tells us more.
President Trump says he believes North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will honor the denuclearization deal they inked in Singapore last month. Trump's tweet on Monday was his first response following U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang late last week, where he met with senior North Korean official Kim Jong-un. The message is being interpreted to be a semi-threatening one to the North's leader to live up to their denuclearization agreement. The tweet comes amid criticism in the U.S. that the first high-level meeting between the two countries since Singapore failed to bring about any substantial results. Critics of the Trump administration accuse it of simply making concessions to the North, including the halt in joint military drills with South Korea, while gaining nothing from its meetings with the regime. Pyongyang and Washington are scheduled to meet on Thursday at the inter-Korean village of Panmunjom to discuss the return of the remains of U.S. soldiers who died during the Korean War. They've also agreed to hold working-level talks to discuss shutting down the North's missile engine testing facility at Dongchangli. President Trump also targeted China in a tweet, saying he hopes Beijing will not exert negative pressure on the North because of Washington's trade policies. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, joining us in the studio, we have with us Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy to share his thoughts. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's start by going over that tweet by President Trump. It was his first response to Pompeo's trip to Pyongyang. And he said, I quote, "I have confidence that Kim Jong-un will honor the contract we signed, and even more importantly, our handshake. We agreed to the denuclearization of North Korea. China, on the other hand, may be exerting negative pressure on a deal because of our posture on Chinese trade. Hope not, exclamation mark." So despite Pompeo coming back from Pyongyang with very little, Trump has said he basically trusts Kim. What do you make of these comments?
Yes, I think Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang was disappointing. The U.S. and all the experts and media expected that some kinds of initial phase of denuclearizing North Korea would be possible with Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang, but the result and outcome was only the extension of the ongoing discussions with North Korea about denuclearization. So we were kind of curious of what the Trump's response would be, and his tweeting was that he still believes in Kim Jong-un's intentions for denuclearization. All the trust-building measures between two leaders in Singapore, Trump still supports it. I think thinking about the domestic issues, domestic situations of President Trump, I think he still thinks that this kinds of two countries deal to denuclearize North Korea is worth dragging to the point in which there will be a midterm election in November. So I think according to Trump's calculations, I think North Korea-U.S. deal and negotiations relations, I think would be beneficial to his domestic interest, I think. But at the same time, what he mentioned was about the China thing, the trade war issues and all that kind of thing. So I think his main concern now may be different from last year, but now his main concern, main target is bashing China, not North Korea. So maybe dealing with North Korea would be really useful tool and leverage to bash China and domestic political benefit for Trump. But I think his main target to bash is China.
Do you think those accusations are justified about China, I mean?
Yeah, I think, one of the negotiation skills of President Trump is that, let's use North Korea as important excuses to bash China. That happened even from last year. I mean, the China being a responsible country for North Korea, China to have to do something, cooperate with the international community sanctions on North Korea. So whenever North Korea did some test last year, China became a target of Trump because, you China, you did not do your responsibility. So that's why North Korea is still, testing their nuclear weapons. So you have to be the one that should be punished. And now because of all the trade, surpluses of China to the United States. Now two countries began the trade war, and I think this at the same time is a very important pathway that will be justified because of the China-North Korea close relationship, which is hampering the current deal between North Korea and the United States.
Do you think Trump may be also sending a message to North Korea and Kim Jong-un, saying basically, we know China's behind you, you better watch out what you do?
Yeah, I think this is very clear signal. Okay, in order, this is to make the two countries' relationship to be decoupled. By punishing and by bashing China in trade terms, I'm not sure what's going to be the outcome of trade war, but many experts says the United States is definitely, in a more favorable term vis-a-vis China. According to the pathway of the trade war between two countries, I think North Korea will finally realize that, okay, because of U.S. being the possible victor in the trade war, maybe leaning towards China would not be a good strategy to deal with the United States. So I think this is a very good strategy to make North Korea to focus more on the United States rather than Russia or rather than on China.
Do you think China really would deliberately interfere with the U.S.-North Korea relations? I mean, why would they?
Okay, this is, from the surface, this is the deal between the United States and North Korea about denuclearizing North Korea. But we have to look at this from the angle of regional angle, Northeast Asia. Because the Korean Peninsula has been, especially North Korea, has been an important buffer of China vis-a-vis the United States. Whenever U.S. involvement in this region have been very active, the value of North Korea important buffer to China became very high. When U.S. was away from the Asia region, China really did not care much about North Korea. It tried to tame North Korea. So now is the time that Trump, with its recovered economic capability, is now trying to come to Asia more actively, bash China more actively. So from the Chinese perspective, North Korea, a buffer, is becoming more and more important than the past.
During Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang, we all thought he'd be seeing Kim Jong-un, but Kim Jong-un failed to turn up. He gave some excuses. Kim Jong-un was also missing a few days previously when he didn't turn up to the inter-Korean basketball games. And we all know how much he likes basketball. So he was missing for a few days, but now he's finally appeared back on North Korean state media. They reported him visiting a construction site and a potato farm in Samjeong County. Does that show where his priorities lie right now?
This is not the first time that he has been, going over to the border area between North Korea and China. I think 3 or 4 previous trips to the border area has been made by Kim Jong-un, which is, making it clear that he is trying to initiate very actively the border-to-border economic cooperation with China. Maybe China have promised to North Korea that, okay, you have to follow the rules of China when you deal with the United States. In return, we can give you a lot of economic support, including development of the border area and making them as one of the special zone of economic development for North Korea. So I think in order for that kinds of cooperation with China, I think Kim Jong-un has been series of trips to the border area now, and maybe this will be good for North Korea. Maybe this will be a signal that two countries' relationship is going back to the traditional relationship. But I don't think this is a good signal for a very constructive denuclearization negotiation between the United States and North Korea.
There again, China's influence in North Korea's economy, very important. But on the other hand, Pompeo has also offered a carrot as well, saying he was recently in Vietnam, he highlighted how much the economic benefit between the relationship with the US and Vietnam has helped Vietnam become a prosperous country, and saying, North Korea, you can be the same. I mean, what do you think of those comments?
This kinds of remarks by the US high-level official have been made already. Pompeo said this several times. I mean, and President Trump also said this several times. North Korea will be, the future of North Korea will be like South Korea. Will have economic development in the U.S. private firms will be investing in North Korea, all that kind of things. But he said that one more time, right after his failed negotiations with North Korea when he visited Pyongyang. So I think this is another remark of giving positive incentive to North Korea. But another thing I think that needs to take note of, more note of, I think, is that he mentioned of simultaneous negotiations. He said that he will achieve, restoring relationship, giving security guarantee, and denuclearization. Three things should be implemented simultaneously. So that means that the U.S. is now officially accepting the North Korean formula and approach to denuclearization, step-by-step simultaneous approach to denuclearization and provision of security guarantee to North Korea. So I think this might be, a good incentive to North Korea and a good signal for a further and future, good outcome of the negotiation.
Pompeo cited the comparison between Vietnam and the US, but is that actually comparable to US and North Korea going forward?
Yes, when you look at the history of two countries, they definitely had a war with the United States, the US and Vietnam War and Korean War. But the Vietnam case was that, even though there were still a frozen relationship, Vietnam tried to, change the relationship, return the remains of the United soldiers in Vietnam to the United States. And I think this became important, momentum for the development of two countries' relationship. And ever since that, they have began to, the US was very active to develop Vietnam, change that economic system into capitalistic. So I think the Pompeo's remark is that, we'll do the same thing that we did to Vietnam to North Korea. I think this will be very good, incentive to North Korea.
One issue that we thought would be resolved when Pompeo went to North Korea was the return of the remains of the Korean War US soldiers who died in the Korean War. But that now seems like further working level talks are going to take place on Thursday. But what do you think is the holdup? Why do you think North Korea is holding back on giving these remains back? I mean, it almost seems like they're keeping them hostage.
We can think of this in two ways. First, it's North Korean strategy. North Korea has been always tried to make one issue into several, making attention of the United States into many agenda and making and dragging time period which is needed for negotiation and extending the time period. I think this time denuclearization, return of remains, and also destroying the missile engine testing site. All these issues has been separately, put into each different panels for discussions. So I think this might be a North Korean strategy. Second thing we can think of is that North Korea is really disappointed. I mean, North Korea thinks that, we did so many things to the United States, but the US is not doing much. They're only insisting denuclearization of North Korea. So North Korea is really angry and they're not doing anything and they're not dealing anything with the United States. They're just postponing and dragging all the issues. So that's the result of all these so-called salami strategic, negotiation outcome.
But then let's say the working level talks go great and the North Korea return the remains of the US soldiers. What happens next? Doesn't that mean US have to give something back in return after that?
Well, I think this would not satisfy North Korea. These issues and these agenda are just a subsidiary and non-important. These are important, but these are not main issues. Main issues is denuclearization and security guarantee. These two should be swapped by two countries. So I think when Pompeo visited, what North Korean Foreign Ministry spokesman said in his discourse was that the declaration of the end of the Korean War should be something that North Korea is wanting from the United States. So I think the next step when two countries' working level discussion is continuing is that denuclearization from one hand, and the other hand, I think at the end of declaration of the end of the Korean War. These two issues, I think, would be discussed simultaneously and swapping with each other.
So you're saying the remains won't necessarily have anything to do with the denuclearization talks? They're kind of separate from now.
That will be a very good incentive, but that are not the main issues that U.S. is expecting.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll keep watch of those talks that are happening later this week, and we'll see what comes out of them. Thank you for coming in today.
Okay, thank you.
Now that concludes our show for today, but I'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth look at the day's top stories. Hope you can join us then, and in the meantime, thank you for watching, and goodbye.